Hi there, I'm Libby from Minerva, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make Style Arc's Bob Woven Pant pattern. This is a fantastic beginner pattern where you're going to learn how to put in pockets and elastic waistband. We're going to go through all the steps together, from selecting your size to cutting out and assembling your garment. Let's go. So let's talk supplies. Everything you need for this project you can get from Minerva. And if you're a craft club member, you can get 10% off all of your purchases. We're going to use a lovely linen fabric for this project. This is 100% linen oil from Minerva's core range. It's a lovely, breathable fabric for summer projects, and it's nice and easy for us to work with. It's important that you wash your fabric before starting your project, as there may be some shrinkage, particularly with natural fibers. I'd also want to point out that this fabric is 140 centimeters wide, whereas your pattern calls for 150 centimeters wide. And while I'm going to show you a hack to get around this today, it's worth noting when selecting a fabric that you may need to order some additional fabric if it's not 150 centimeters wide. We also have 38 millimeter wide elastic for our waistband, a matching thread. This is Gutermann thread, which I find very high quality and machine friendly. And as a nice finishing touch, I'll show you how to attach a woven label to your pants. We're now ready to cut out our pattern pieces, so we need to find out what size we need. To do this, we can take a look at the finished garment measurements. So for this style, because it is a relaxed fit and your tightest measurement is around the waist, we're going to be looking at the waist and the hip measurement. And you can see that they are the first two measurements shown in this table. Once you've found your waist and hip measurements, make sure that your hip measurement it does not exceed the waistband without elastic measurement, because this is how you're going to be able to get your trousers on. You need to make sure that you can pull them up over your hips. If you find that your waist and your hip sizes don't fall neatly into one size, be guided by the waistband without elastic measurement. You can always shorten the elastic in the waistband to get a better fit. Let's take a quick look at the pattern together and some of the key markings that you need to be aware of. So first of all, now that you know your size, you will see that there is a corresponding color marked on the pattern here. I'm going to be cutting out the size 12, and so that means that I'm looking for the blue line, which is also 2 in from the outside if you're having trouble with the colors. So here I can see there's a solid blue line. There is also a corresponding dotted line, and that indicates the 1 centimeter seam allowance, which is built into the pattern. So while we're cutting, we don't need to worry about this dotted line, just the solid blue line. I now have all my pattern pieces cut out, and I've given them a quick press with a warm iron so they sit flat on my fabric.
Now that our paper pieces are ready, we can prepare our fabric for cutting. The first thing you want to do is fold your fabric in half so that the selvage edges are touching. The selvage edge is the woven, not the cut edge. Then you want to arrange your pattern pieces so that the grain lines on the pattern pieces is parallel to the outer edge or the folded edge of your fabric. You can see that I've taken a slight deviation here because my fabric is 140 centimeters wide, and I have chosen to lay my waistband on the folded edge in half so that it's actually perpendicular to the grain line. I'm using a plain fabric, so this isn't going to make a big impact on the garment. However, if you're using a pattern, you may want to get extra fabric if you have something narrower than 150 centimeters. You can now go ahead and pin your pattern pieces to the fabric, ready for cutting out.
As we know, this pattern has notches that we need to mark onto our fabric to help us line up the pieces later. All you need to do for this is make a short 1/2 centimeter nick into the fabric that you can see once you've removed the pattern pieces.
Okay, so now we're ready to start sewing our project. I'm going to be using a basic sewing machine today and no overlocking, so I'll show you an alternative way to finish your seams and keep them neat in the wash. I've got my pre-cut pattern pieces, our pattern, thread and elastic, and in terms of tools I've got some sewing shears, nice and sharp, and I have some sewing pins which we'll use to fasten the pattern pieces as we sew them. So let's go. So for step one, we're going to start with the front pant panel. So I've left the paper on so we can talk about the notches that we made earlier. You'll need 2 of your pocket pieces as well. So if we just zoom in a little bit here, you can see these notches that we've marked on the fabric correspond with the pocket bag pieces. So when we go to pin, we're going to be lining up those notches like so.
I've now attached a single pocket bag to each of the front pant pieces with right sides facing, and they're ready to sew.
So as a reminder, we have that 1 centimeter seam allowance, and depending on the machine you have, you may have these markers here that show you how far away from the needle you're going to be stitching. So if you've got these, align to the 3/8 or the 1 centimeter mark. They're very, very similar. And then drop your presser foot and we're ready to sew. You can put a few backwards and forward stitches in at the beginning and end of your stitching to secure, or if you have on your machine the function to start and finish your stitching like I do, we're just going to press that, get that row of stitching started, and then off we go. Folding the pocket bag out over the seam allowance, give that a press to make sure that you have opened up the pocket bag nice and flush with that stitching. Just like that. I'm going to repeat for the other pocket bag as well. So everything that we do, we'll be doing in duplicate. Great. And now we have our 2 pocket bags stitched in, ironed out, and the next step is going to be securing with that row of stitching parallel to our seam just along here. So to put in the row of stitching, as we know from the instructions, we want to put it pocket side. And what I've done to help demonstrate is I've completed one of the pockets so you can see the final product of what we're going for, and then I'll show you how to mark up the other pocket for a nice neat finish. So as you can see, it's on the right side of the fabric that we've stitched down with that seam pressed and open. So if you flip it over, you can see our seam allowance has also been stitched to face towards the pocket. I've stitched about 1/2 centimeter away from that seam. So you can either use guides on your sewing machine to achieve this, or if you want a little bit more certainty, just pop a couple of marks with a soluble pen. So anything that you know is going to wash out of the fabric, that might even be like a kid's marker or something, or a fabric pen or some chalk. And just put a line down along the pocket side where you want to do your stitching. And for safety, we're just going to add in a few pins. The next thing we're going to do is repeat these steps, but with the back panel pieces. So just to recap, we want to lay the pocket bag onto the trouser piece, right sides facing each other. We are going to align at the notches, stitch with that 1 centimeter seam allowance to attach the bag, and then we are going to press open the pocket and stitch about 1/2 centimeter away from that seam to leave a lovely flush finish. I'm going to demonstrate step 2 on one of the pant legs. So for the next step, you need one front piece and one back piece. And as you can see, the front piece is much narrower than the back piece if you're not sure which is which. So what we want to do here is line up the pieces on the outer edge. So again, we've got some lovely helpful notches all the way down the pant leg, which are going to help us do this. Okay, so we now have our front and back pant leg pieces pinned together with right sides facing, and we can tell we've got the right sides together because we've got the raw edge facing out. We are going to stitch 1 centimeter away from the edge all the way down the pant leg. We're going to drop our needle in here to pivot. We're going to stitch around the pocket bag. Once we get back to the pant leg, we're going to drop our pin once again and pivot, and then line up to stitch all the way down to the bottom of the pant leg. So let's do this first leg together just to show you what I mean about pivoting. So lining up to the 1 centimeter mark and starting right at the top of our fabric. Let's do a few stitches in the same spot to secure, or a few front and back stitches. And then off we go. So we're going to stitch down to the pocket bag. And then once we're about 1 centimeter away from the top edge of the pocket bag, we're going to drop our needle. We're going to turn, and we're going to move on to stitching around the pocket bag. So as we approach the trousers, lining up with the seam where we've attached the pocket bag, once again, we're going to drop that needle, pivot the trouser piece so that the presser foot is now facing down the edge of the pant leg. And we're going to go ahead and sew all the way down this side seam. And finishing off with a few stitches to secure. So with the pant legs facing right side down on your ironing board, we're just going to press that seam with the pocket facing forward, and then we can have a look. So flipping it over, here is what the outside of our trousers are going to look like. And you'll see we now have a fully functioning pocket. Super neat. It's lovely and flush with the seam. You can see that little stitch that we put in underneath just to hold it flush. That's all looking really beautiful. And we're now ready to repeat it on the other side. So there's a number of ways that you can do this. If you have a serger or an overlocker, please go ahead and finish your seams as you would usually. However, if you're working off just your sewing machine today, what you can do is run a row of zigzag stitch all the way down the length of that side seam and around the pocket, and that just gives it a little bit of extra protection in the wash to stop it unraveling. To do this, I've used a zigzag stitch with a width of 5 and a stitch length of 2.5. Okay, so we are absolutely storming along, and we have one last step to complete our pant legs and get them into one piece. So what we're going to be doing is stitching together the inside seam of the pant legs. So with right sides together, so pocket facing out, all we want to do is put a row of stitching in along this inside seam. Remember, we've got our really handy notches that we snipped once we cut out our pattern pieces that are going to help us align. So go ahead and pin all the way down the inside of the pant leg. So now we have one fully completed pant leg, and we can go ahead and repeat all those steps on the other side as well. So just to recap what we're going to do, with right sides facing, line up that inner seam of the pant leg, matching up your notches along the way. Put in a single row of straight stitch 1 centimeter away from the edge, and then a zigzag stitch as well to seal off that edge or use your serger. And then press towards the front panel once you're finished. So let's go ahead and retake all of those steps. So now we have 2 completed pant legs, and the final step before we move on to the waistband is to stitch the pant legs together at the crotch. So referring back to the diagrams here for this one, we're going to be looking at this seam that runs from waistband to waistband. So to do this, what we want to do is turn one of these legs inside out. So one pant leg will be the right way around, and one is the wrong way around. Next thing we want to do is pull the pant leg that is right side out, so as you would wear them with the nice neat pocket on the outside. Take that pant leg and thread it down through the other pant leg, making like a little bit of a pant leg burrito. Okay, so once that's thoroughly pulled through, you're going to notice that those seams around the crotch are starting to line up, and we can look at putting some pins in. So starting with the middle seam that we've just completed to join pant legs together, we're just going to pop a pin in at that midpoint. And then once again, looking for our notches and lining those up, we're going to pin all the way around the crotch. So now you can see that we've got that inside seam with right sides facing pinned all the way around, and we're now ready to sew. Okay, so I've finished off that inner seam. I've also put my zigzag stitch to seal, and now we can pull our fabric back out. And voila, there we go. So they're really starting to come together now. It's a really exciting part of the project. We only have the waistband and the seam, hemming on the trousers to go, and then these are going to be ready to wear. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to show you how to put in an optional label if you want to use one. So I'm using one of Minerva's lovely woven labels here, and it's super duper simple. All we're going to do is tack that into the back of our trousers or wherever you want to put them in. You might want to have it off the side. And we're going to put a bit of stay stitching in place, roughly half a centimeter from the edge of the fabric. So we are going to be creating a ring out of this fabric. So we're going to start by stitching the ends of the waistband together like this. We are going to do the same with our elastic. Once I've measured it to my waist, this is just a bit for demonstration. And then we're going to be combining those 2 loops with the elastic stretched and attaching the elastic to 1/2 of the waistband. So we'll pin it into this piece, stretch it out, and while it's stretched, we'll put some stitching in place to hold it. Then we'll be folding the waistband down and attaching it to our trousers, so you'll get a lovely, neat finish on the outside. So let's get started with the first step here, which is stitching the ends of the waistband together using our 1 centimeter seam allowance. Okay, so I have sewn the ends of my waistband together. And what I've also done, just to help with the following steps, is I've ironed it in half lengthways. And I've also put some marks just by folding it and giving it a press at the front midpoint and the side points. And what this is going to do is help us line up the elastic so that when we're pinning the elastic, it's got a nice even distribution. The next step that we want to do is get our elastic connected. So I've measured this to my waist measurement, so it's been sitting quite firmly on my waist, just because you do sometimes lose a bit of elasticity once you sew down to the fabric. So you can refer to the size chart to see how much elastic you need, or measure off your own waist if you want to have a more tailored fit. And so what we're going to do is sew this into a large loop, and I'm going to put just a square of stitching to achieve that. So now we're going to attach the elastic to the waistband, and as you can see on my waistband, I've got some helpful ironing marks. So one through the middle where I folded in half, and then ironing marks at the sides as well where I've given it a slight press. And I've marked my elastic as well at the front, back and sides so that I can line up to those creases and get that lovely even distribution on the elastic. It can be a little bit awkward pinning elastic to fabric when there's this much of a difference in the size, because you're going to be stretching it all the way out to this length. But I've got a trick using an ironing board that I'm going to show you, which I find super duper helpful. So what you want to do is loop your fabric over your ironing board like so. And remember, we're going to be sewing the elastic to the wrong side of the fabric. So once that's looped down, I've got my back seam with it pressed open, facing straight up, and I'm going to align my elastic to sit over the top. So first I want to pin in the middle, the sides and the back, and then we're going to start stretching the elastic around the ironing board to help us get that nice even distribution. So matching up my pen marks with the elastic. Already you can kind of see how I'm using the ironing board to make my life a bit easier there. And we've got our back mark, which I've unhelpfully put on the other side of the elastic, but that's fine, I can see it through. And then let's go around to that last side seam. So again, looking for that crease that we've ironed in to show where the side will be. I'm going to put another pin in there. So now you've got your pins at nice even intervals, and you want to put some pins in between just to secure. So here we go. We've stretched the fabric, the elastic, round the ironing board, and now I can just go along and put in extra pins in between. And then when I let that go, you can see the gathering effect is already starting. So let's go ahead and do that around the entire waistband. So we're going to just refer back to our instructions quickly here, because I think this diagram is particularly helpful. As you can see, we're putting a row of stitching in a zigzag stitch just below that fold line. So we're only putting the one row in, we're not stitching down further. So let's go ahead and set our machine to a zigzag stitch. I'm going to use the same settings that I've been using for my hem. So that is with a width of 5 and a stitch length of 2.5. And I'm going to remove my pins as I go, make sure I'm properly lined up, and I'm going to line up the edge of the elastic just with the silver inside of the presser foot. This is just my personal preference. I quite like to pick something on the presser foot to line up with when I can't see those lines underneath. So let's go ahead and get started with some stay stitching at that middle back seam through the elastic. And then as we are stitching along here, I recommend holding the fabric at the front and the back and stretching out so that you meet your elastic like so. So let's give that a go. And I've got to get my needle into that default down position. And let's once again pull out that fabric at the back, stretching the elastic. And while it's stretched, sewing along. So already at the back, you can see we're getting that lovely gathered effect. So let's go ahead and finish off all the way around the waistband. There's one last thing we need to do in step 7 before we can attach the waistband to our trousers, and that is to put a stay stitch in place, which is going to help us when we attach the waistband. So well done. The last thing we did was definitely the hardest part. So all smooth sailing from here on out. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold the fabric in half around the elastic and just put a pin in place there so that we know where to stitch. And again, we're going to do that all the way around the band. Let's go. Okay, so we've got that pinned incrementally around, a little bit awkward, but luckily again, we had our helpful notches to line up, and we can take this one over to the machine. Okay, so once again, let's use that same technique of stretching the fabric and the elastic around the machine to get that stay stitch in place. And voila, there we go. Our waistband is now complete. You can see that lovely gather coming through. Looks very dramatic in the linen. I'm really loving this. And we're ready to attach it to our trousers. Okay, so we're now at step 8 and we're really into the home stretch now. We're going to attach the waistband to the trousers. So to do this, I'm going to first of all line up that seam on the waistband with the back of the trousers. Great. Then looping that waistband around the outside of the trousers, I'm going to attach the waistband matching to the notches. So there's our first notch for the side seam. Let's drop a pin in there. And then do a quick check to make sure that that's the right length. Perfect. Let's find our next notch. For the other side. And just check that's the right length. Once again, that's looking pretty good. Great, and now similar to what we did with the waistband, I'm going to stretch out that waistband against the trousers and we'll pin all the way around. Okay, so one final time we are ready to use this technique of stretching the fabric out under the machine. So as a reminder, I've got the front console removed, I've got my needle in the downward position, and I'm ready to stitch 1 centimeter away from this edge, and we're going to go all the way around the trousers. Okay, our trousers are now in one piece and it's looking really lovely. We've got that great gather through the waistband. We should have your zigzag on the inside. I've got my label stitched in as well. And we are ready to do the final steps, which is hemming the trousers. There is roughly a 2 centimeter hem allowance. So where the fabric kicks in, you'll notice there was a bit of a kick when we had the fabric out the wrong side. And that's because it's a balloon leg. So where it's kicking, that's where we're going to fold it up and take it up. So to do this, I recommend folding the pants back inside out. It's just going to make it that little bit easier. We'll be able to more easily measure that distance. So we've got them inside out. Let's make our way over to the ironing board and we're going to measure and press those seams up ready to be hemmed. What I recommend, this is how I personally like to hem, is folding and measuring 2 centimeters from your fold and then bringing in the iron to give that a little flatten out. Then you can move slightly further down. Once again, fold, measure a couple of centimeters from your fold and iron that out. And we're going to do that all the way around our pant leg. Remember to keep your seam allowance facing forward. Okay, we're back at the machine for the final time. We've got our front console removed. We're back on a straight stitch if you've just been hemming, finishing off the seams on the waistband. And now we're going to put in that final row of stitching around the bottom of the pant leg just to neaten it up. So fix your pant leg over the arm, and I recommend starting in the seam. So we've got 2 centimeters here. I recommend stitching a good 1.5 centimeters up from the bottom. You could do slightly more. You can get closer to 2 if you'd like. 1.5 is a nice, comfortable position. Great. And so if we pull that pant leg back in right side out, you can see that we're left with a beautiful neat hem. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat that same step on the other side. And that's it. You're now finished sewing.